Today, we're going to talk about attachment styles and childhood trauma.
Trauma does not need to be physical. We consider trauma as something that is physical, but trauma can be something that's emotional and can be anything that causes you discomfort.
What is interesting to me is that most men are like that, right? Most men are take it or leave it. Most men don't really care about their relationship to that degree.
Right.
And that's a big issue in relationships. Welcome to the 1024, where we talk about love, finance, and anything in between. We're your hosts, Brian
and Dr. Sam.
And today we're going to talk about attachment styles and childhood trauma.
Okay, so this is an episode. I think there is a need for some education before we actually go into it. So I guess the different types of attachment styles. Attachment styles are basically what happens to you as a child and your interactions with your parents and how that creates an attachment bond, and then how that influences you as an adult. So there are several types of attachment styles. There's a secure attachment, avoidant attachment, a disorganized attachment, and anxiety attachment.
Okay.
So what secure attachment looks like as a child, your parent can leave you in another room and go and fix dinner, and you're absolutely okay. You're playing with your toys. Everything's all right. Anxious attachment is like, where did my parent go? Where's my parent? What's going on? Where's my parent? Avoidant attachment is like, I could take it or leave it. I really don't need parents. It is what it is. I'll be okay. And disorganized is more like, where's my parent? I love my parent. I could take it or leave it. It's all over the place. What happens in our childhood, the childhood trauma that we experience, actually affects us in adulthood. So it's really important, especially when you're dating and when you're in relationships, to figure out what your attachment style is. You can be really secure. It doesn't really matter what your partner does. You're able to function. You can be anxious. You can always be worrying where your partner is, if your partner still loves you. You constantly need reassurance from your partner. Or you could be avoidant and be like, it really doesn't matter. I could take it or leave it. I really don't need relationships. I'm good all by myself. And you can be disorganized. 1 minute you're like, I'm good. I don't need anyone in my life. It's whatever. I don't trust anyone. Actually, where's my partner at? I want to know what's going on with my partner. I feel insecure. So it's like all over the place. But it's important to recognize what these attachment styles are within yourself, because I think it's important to know how you show up in your relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely important to know how you show up. I think that that's a part of it as well. Your childhood affected you in a certain way, and it comes with you into adulthood. This comedian I was listening to, he said something that was very spot on. It's like, we're just adult children walking around,
right?
And we're dealing with the same types of issues that we had from childhood till now, and then we're treating people based off of the feelings that we're experiencing. What is interesting to me is that these situations never really get rectified. And when you're having a relationship, you're trying to make it work seamlessly. The disorganized person, right? This question goes for all of the different attachment styles. But how does one become disorganized? How does one just become I want you, no, I don't want you. I could do without you. And bounce between different attachment styles. How does that happen?
So I think like I said, it stems from childhood and how your parents interacted with you. So your parent might have been hot and cold. Your parent could have been very loving and made you feel secure, made you feel like they were always going to be there for you, that they had your back. And then your parent could give you the silent treatment the next day. And so you were never really sure what you were going to get from your parents. So that created a disorganized thought process or disorganized attachment where you didn't know what you're going to get. So therefore, in your head, you have multiple attachment styles going on.
Okay. And what about the other one? So with being anxious, is that just your parent was always hot and they were always screaming at you and it wasn't a safe environment?
Anxious is not knowing. So this is your parent always being detached from you. So anxious is you need that reassurance. You need that person to comfort you, but your parent could be the person giving you the silent treatment, the person not giving you attention. So you're anxious. You're anxious in this fact of like, you want something and you don't know whether or not you're going to receive that. So that shows up in adulthood or shows up in your adult relationships.
Okay, so like, what if the situation was like an unsafe environment? Like somebody that was angry, somebody that was alcoholic, whatever it is. What's in a typical attachment style for someone that goes through a situation of kind of being like not knowing what is going to happen?
That seems like anxious. You don't know what your parent is going to do. So you're anxious of the relationship.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, because there's like neglect involved.
Yeah.
And you're not getting exactly what you need, I guess, on an emotional level, that creates anxiousness.
So there's two different things that you said. Neglect is definitely different than your parent is an alcoholic. There could be caring parents that are alcoholics. But if you're saying the child is experiencing neglect, that normally goes to avoidant attachment styles where you feel like you don't need anyone because you're learning to be independent. You're learning to be extremely independent, hyper independent because your parent is neglecting you.
Okay, I'm getting confused then. So what you were saying with anxious is you weren't getting the actual emotional responses that you need. Like you need these emotional things from your parent.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody's neglecting a child, you're saying that is going to stem through avoidance.
Yeah, I will say actually it can do both. It can stem through, you can then become hyper independent.
Okay.
Or you can go and be anxious and be like,
okay. That makes sense in my head. So like if a person has experiences both, does that make them disorganized?
It can be. Yeah, there's no definitive path, but it is assumed that if you had a secure relationship with your parents, you would be a secure person. But obviously things in your life can change that will. So I can't say Y, if you X, you're definitely equals Y. I can't say that. What I can say is those attachment styles that happen that are not secure, that are shaky, can then have all these other insecure attachments. So secure is secure, but then the insecure ones are anxious, avoidant, and disorganized.
Okay. I agree. I think that I simplify everything in my head for some reason, and I know this is not like the study and all that, but for me, it sounds like it's either you're secure or you're not, right? Like you're secure or you're disorganized is how you would put it. Because I think somebody that has gone through emotional neglect or they haven't had the things that they needed growing up emotionally, the fact that they can go through avoidance or they can go through anxiety and like those things can go hand in hand. I think people experience those just from not having security. You know, like I don't think there's someone out there that hasn't had a good relationship with their parents that only has avoidance.
Oh, no. I should also clarify and say there is a possibility that people have a mixture of both. So I
think it's a strong probability.
Yeah. So I'm not saying you can only have one. I'm just describing the different types. So like avoidant is this, disorganized is this.
So you're saying like these are like primary.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like if I'm thinking about my childhood, I was adopted. I didn't feel like my parents were involved to the degree of helping guide me through life, but they were involved on a level where it was a safe environment and where they were able to put a house over my head and like the necessities I had, right? I'm probably higher up on the avoidance scale. The anxious scale, I don't see as much.
Right.
But like if I was like, was there ever a time you were anxious? I am 100% sure there was a time I was anxious, right?
Right.
Like if you were to categorize myself, it would either go under avoid or go under disorganized. Just because I know that the other one is a possibility somewhere.
Right.
But then also it would go under secure because there was a portion of the relationship with my parents that was secure. I could count on them for food. I could count on them for shelter. You know, the thing, like I just wasn't where I saw the trajectory of my life going, which was a bigger issue.
Yeah. So I should also say attachment styles are mainly emotional. This is not the security as in like, I had a roof over my head, but this was the emotional security that you had with your parents, and then how that relates to the emotional security or attachment you have with other people.
What is emotional security?
So, like I said, like you knew your parents were there to comfort you emotionally.
Right.
You knew your parents were there to help you grow. You knew your parents were there to be a sounding board. You knew your parents were there to provide love and affection and all those things that's just like not food and shelter.
Right. So that would be emotional security is what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what being secure means in attachment styles. That's what it, yeah.
Okay. So then I would categorize as secure under that umbrella. But then I got to a point where it was avoidance. So what is that?
So you got to a point where your parents were avoiding you, or you got to a point where you were being avoidant?
I got to a point where I was being avoidant.
I think your situation is unique because I don't know the dynamics of it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Was it a situation where your parents were providing everything that they needed to provide emotionally? They were there for you, and then you pulled away?
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So that situation could be because you were adopted and you didn't see those people as a secure attachment for you. And therefore you decided to pull away.
So that can, so like I said, in the beginning of time to up till middle school, I felt very secure. And then after that point is when I realized, wait, I'm adopted. This is a situation that's not me. Who am I? Like that kind of thing.
Right.
That's when I pulled away.
Right.
Right. So like you can actually, it doesn't have to be like when you're 3 years old.
Yeah, no.
It can be at any point in time. Wow, I didn't know that.
It could be at any point in time and in any relationship.
Okay.
So like there could be relationships where you're like, oh my God, I had an anxious attachment with this person. Then there could be a relationship where like, I had a really secure attachment with this person. And there could be a relationship where like, I was really disorganized with this person.
Wow.
So it's never like solidified one thing, but I think how we grow up definitely influences how we function as adults.
Yeah. It's like how we see the world. It's like it's a fundamental foundational thing.
Right.
That's when your brain is developing.
Right.
And they say the things with emotions is that they're in motion, right? So you may not experience it now, but you could experience it later. So that's good to know that these aren't just childhood trauma things.
Right.
These can be any point in time in your life.
Right. So for me, one of the things that I did during my working on myself period was figure out what my attachment style was. So for me, I was avoidant. I had an avoidant attachment style. So this was because my childhood growing up, I was hyper independent. I did things all on my own. So for me, I did not need anyone. Like that was my attachment style. I could take you or leave you. You don't contribute to my life. You don't take away from my life. It is what it is. And I realized that I had done that in most of my relationships when I was younger. It was like, I didn't need to be in a relationship with you if this ended. So what? I was not going to pursue you. I was not going to call you. I deleted you and moved on. That's how I functioned through life because that's how my childhood was. So I had became very resilient, not in a good way, very resilient and hyper independent. And so that showed up in all my relationships when I was younger.
So why is that not a good thing? The reason I ask is because to me, that sounds great. Like to most people that have a hard time, staying in a relationship with a person that is not treating them well, would love to just be like, you know what, fuck you, I'm off. I'm doing my own thing. So you're saying that it wasn't a good thing. Why was it past that lane where you're like, this is not good?
So it didn't matter if the person was treating me good or bad. I was avoidant of relationships. I didn't need to be in one. If I was done, I was done. There was no like, oh, we had one argument. I don't need this. I'm avoidant. I don't need you. I don't need this emotional connection. I can be on my own. Resilient to me is this idea that you are tough and always have to be tough, even when you need to be weak.
Ah, I see. Okay. So it got to a point, or it was always a point that it was just like, it's me no matter what. I got my own back and nobody else does.
Yep. And I was not going to allow anybody into my life. It showed up in my friendships. Take it or leave it. I'm kind of still like this, where
her friends are looking at this like, yeah, that's exactly how she is. Tell them.
Where like
treat me like shit.
Where I'm terrible with communication and like I'll lose track of friends and I would feel nothing. I would feel nothing once my relationship was over with these friends.
Yeah.
Same thing with relationships with men. I would feel nothing when these relationships were done with men because it was just like, Oh, well, I
Yeah.
got this. I got my own back. I need to be strong. We're moving right along.
Whoa. I just connected something when you said that. I'm exactly like what you're saying right now.
I know.
I'm exactly like that. It's probably why you want to do this episode. But no, like I'm exactly like that. But what's interesting to me is that you've told me that you were raised like a boy, right? The reason it's interesting to me is because
I was raised like a boy.
yeah, like you were saying that like you were raised like a boy, right?
I'm confused. Explain that further.
Well, I'm trying to.
Okay.
I'm saying like you were saying that you were raised like a boy, like a tomboy or whatever. You watch football. You did things with your brother.
Okay.
You weren't introduced to girly things per se, right?
Okay.
So what is interesting to me is that most men are like that. Right? Most men are take it or leave it. Most men don't really care about their relationship to that degree.
Right.
And that's a big issue in relationships because you're hurting people in the process and the man is like, yeah, man, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? And I can attest to it. Like, I'm exactly like that.
Right.
So I'm like, is it something about how you were raised that you became basically like how a man would respond to these things?
It wasn't because I was not raised as a tomboy. The reason why I became a tomboy was because me and my older brother were extremely close and I wanted to do everything he did. And my brother was a man. So like,
I thought it was the football. I could have sworn. I'm like, I like football. You like football. Is that why we're the same?
No, I definitely was like, I wanted to be like my brother. And also I recognized that my brother got special treatment and I also wanted to get special treatment. But one of the main important things in that was the reason why I became an avoidant and became hyper independent is because my parents wanted me to be hyper independent. I cooked, cleaned, did everything an adult should be doing. And then when my younger brother came, I helped raise that human. So like for me, it was always like my parents were putting adult responsibilities on me. So I became very hyper independent. But my parents never treated me or gave me what you would give to a child. Like my parents were never lovey-dovey with me. They were not comforting with me. They were not a sounding board. They weren't all those things. So I was very avoidant of love when it came down to it. When I became an adult, I was definitely that person. Most of my friends that know me from college, a relationship, people seeing this is probably like, wow, Sam. Like a relationship is not something that I wanted to get into. I told everyone I did not want to be married, not to the extent of like, these are fundamental principles, but I didn't want that attachment. I didn't want love. I didn't want that whole, this is someone I'm going to be with for long periods of time. So for me, it was how I was raised is what influenced how I showed up in my adult relationships.
Okay. I guess I'm still trying to figure out why avoidance is the biggest thing. Because, like, for myself, I didn't have that. I didn't have all these additional things that I had to do and responsibility. I didn't have any of that, really. And also, like I said, it was a secure environment emotionally also.
Yeah.
But I came out avoidant.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess I don't understand why I'm in the avoidance category because technically I should not be.
So for someone that's avoidant as a child, this is part of it. You may avoid your parents, which you did.
Right.
You avoided your parents, even though they were your parents. And you're like, wait, I'm adopted. These aren't my real parents. You don't see contact or comfort from your parents, which you did.
I don't see contact or comfort from my parents.
Yeah.
That's not true.
Oh, you did see contact and comfort from your parents.
I did seek contact and comfort. It was always there. It wasn't that I was looking for it. It was just always there.
So seeking is looking for it. Like your parents were, if something went wrong, your parents.
But I'm saying I wasn't looking for it. Like they always presented it.
Oh, so if you're having a bad day, your parents knew you were having a bad day and then comforted you.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no. So they knew I was having a bad day. They'd be like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "No, I don't want to talk about it."
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So they would always present it, and I would always say no.
Yeah, I think your situation is complicated because you're adopted. So like for me, I can be like, my parents were the folks that gave, well, my mom is, or my parents were my biological parents, and there was no outside love, whatever, that I needed to seek because these were the people. So like I think it's different where your parents were not your biological parents. And I think at that time, your biological parents were alive. So maybe there was something within that where you felt like you needed to seek that from your biological parents, or you wanted that from your biological parents, but you couldn't get it from your biological parents.
I think the biggest thing that I wanted was to know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the biggest thing that I remember feeling is like, well, who am I then? Like, these people raised me, so I always see them as parents because they raised me, but I know nothing about myself.
And these people are not who I am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think what happened with me is the realization came all at once, right? So they didn't necessarily show themselves as avoidant parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they didn't necessarily create anxiety within me,
Mm-hmm.
right? What happened was I had a realization, and then I became disorganized, right? And I chose avoidance as a method of pushing people away.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And yeah, I think it's different, but I think it's important because there's adopted people out there. People that don't come from, both parents, having biological parents.
Right.
And it's like when you speak, it's coming from both biological parents in the household. I think it's important to know that it may not necessarily be because of your parents that everything went awry with your attachment style.
Yeah, no. So this is not like a blame thing where it's like the reason why you are because the way you are is because of your parents. This is childhood trauma. So anything that happened in your childhood that caused dysfunction is childhood trauma. It didn't necessarily need to be your parents raising you that caused that, just the discomfort. It could be the fact that you were adopted that caused discomfort.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But the thing is, when we say trauma, right, we're like, someone hit me over the head. It's like, no, it didn't necessarily need to happen.
Yeah.
Right. The distinction is important that it doesn't necessarily need to be the most heinous act that somebody else did to you.
Right.
Right. It can also be, hey, you just realized you were adopted and that's what happened.
Yeah. So trauma does not need to be physical. We consider trauma as something that is physical, but trauma can be something that's emotional and can be anything that causes you discomfort.
Okay.
So emotions and physical.
Got it.
Like I was saying, I think it's important to know these things. It helps you, like what you're doing now, trace back to where this came from, right? So to be able to understand, for me, when I realized I had an avoidant attachment, I needed to go back and be like, why do I have this avoidant attachment?
Why was that something that you wanted to go back and figure out?
Because it explained to me why I didn't have connections with people.
So connections with people was something that you seeked?
No, not at the time.
That's why I'm asking, because it's like I have an avoidance attachment style and fuck everybody. I don't care. I'm good on my own. So why did you want to go back and be like, this is something I should change? Because
I knew it wasn't normal and I knew it wasn't healthy. I knew healthy people have long-lasting relationships with people. Healthy people shouldn't be, you can take it or leave it from people that are in their lives.
How did you know that?
Probably therapy, I'm going to say. I won't be able to tell you definitively at what point.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because it's like, and I'm not saying for you specifically, but I'm saying for people that are more on the spectrum of I'm right, you're wrong, get over it, right? And they're not even considering themselves at all. It's almost like they're in a delusional world and they're just like, nope, this is how I live life, this is me, and you're the problem. That's how they live life. So for people like that, why would they ever go back and be like, this is where things are unhealthy? What would ignite that type of conversation? Because people like that wouldn't necessarily go to therapy, and people like that wouldn't necessarily have a need to reevaluate themselves.
There are always going to be people in life. You can't save everyone. There are always going to be people in life that are to that extreme where they see no fault in themselves. And those people will continue to exist in our society. I think this is more for people that are trying to figure out why things are the way they are. And then you can go and go back and trace oh, this is what I am. Like I said, I knew something was wrong. So I took the test and was like, oh, this is my attachment.
So when you knew something was wrong, what popped up?
Well, I shouldn't say I knew something was wrong. So this was part of my healing process that I was doing after my breakup. So this was figuring out myself, figuring out my flaws, figuring out what I needed to work on. So I had taken the love language test, the attachment style test, the apology styles. I had taken all this stuff to know myself.
Right. But you're doing all these things, right?
Right.
To figure yourself out.
Right.
But that's after you've already identified there's a problem.
Right.
Right. So I'm trying to get to the point where it's like there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So go back further. Right. You said you had a breakup.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the first time that you realized, hey, there's a problem?
No, I knew there was a problem just because I knew most people didn't take or leave their relationships. Like, I knew people stayed in relationships. I see people married. I see people in lasting friendships. Like, I saw that in society. So I knew not everybody in the world is take it or leave it.
But when you were take it or leave it, were you happy?
Yeah, I didn't have any emotion attached to it. So yeah, I guess I was happy. I don't know. I can't say happy is the word. There was no emotion tied to it. So I wasn't like, yes, I broke up another relationship. I was just like, and just keep on pushing.
Okay, so if you solve this problem that you said was a problem, your idea was then you would be happy? Is that what that?
Then I would be whole. And whole leads to happiness.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when this stuff was happening, it was a problem because you're like, there's something missing here. There's a piece that I don't understand or that I'm not doing.
Right.
And I don't know what it is, but I need to figure it out. And that's when you started looking at all the stuff.
Right.
Okay. So was it the relationship that triggered that?
Yeah, I think so. I took 2.5 years to work on myself. And part of that 2.5 years required learning about myself. So I needed, like I said, I had broken down completely. I needed to rebuild myself. I could have stayed broken or I could rebuild myself, and rebuilding myself was part of that process.
Okay. That's interesting. Because like what you described in the beginning, right, was like, I'm a person that could take or leave the relationship.
Right.
But then when you got broken up with, it was like, this is not okay.
Yeah. So when I got broken up with, it hurt. It was the first time it hurt.
Right.
I didn't have feelings for anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get broke up with him. Let's clarify.
Whoa! So you broke up with him and then you felt hurt afterwards.
Yeah. I tell you all the time, I've never been broken up with. But
that's not true.
I tell you all the time before, I've never been broken up with. Right. But for that, I remember feeling hurt. And I was like, why do I feel hurt by this? Normally, this is a take it or leave it. I felt myself feeling emotionally attached to this person. So the things that I had never felt before, I was feeling. And so I was like, now I am devastated, unable to pick myself up because I've never felt this feeling before. I need to build myself back.
So was it better on the other side?
Oh my God, yeah.
So what I mean is like when you didn't know what feelings were, and when you're like, take it or leave it, I don't need you, da-da-da-da. Was that better than knowing?
No, it wasn't better. Okay. Because what happened was I had all take it or leave it friendships.
Okay.
Then that situation happened and I needed to rely on people, but I had take it or leave it friendships.
Okay.
So then I was like, who am I going to emotionally rely on? Like, who is going to help me through this? I'm going to stay in bed for 3 weeks and cry. Like I need someone, but I had been so detached emotionally from people that it was like, and now I have to rely on these people. I have to build an emotional connection with these people.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good point. For a large part of my life, I'm like, well, that's fine. This is how I am. Like, I take it or leave it. I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, oh, your feelings are hurt. Okay. Like, go ahead. Feelings are hurt. That's fine. Like, my feelings aren't hurt. Like, I'll wait for your feelings to get better, but
get unhurt.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is a you problem, not a me problem. So, but like, that's how I always viewed life, right? But like, that not just in relationships, but that's how I viewed friendships and everything like that. But the bigger picture, like you're saying, is like, well, what happens when you need those people to have your back, and then you don't have sustainable relationships?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that really is like a big issue. Like, we're all social creatures,
right?
And if you're pushing people away nonstop, how are you going to have the quality of life if you're not able to be social? And if people can't trust you, or people get hurt by you, and the list goes on and on. So that's a good point. And I'm glad that I asked that question, because it gets to a point where, again, like people that are on the other spectrum, because I think that most women are not like you. And most women have the attachment style that they need this to be happy or to feel whole, instead of, I'm good on my own, I don't need you.
Right.
So I think to the women that look at it in that way, they see the beginning of what you said as, oh, that's great. I would love to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a bigger story behind it. And I think that that's important to say.
Yeah, I think there are women that are anxious attachment styles, which is also an insecure attachment style. Like there are women that's like, I need validation. I need validation. I need validation. I need validation.
That's what I see more often.
Yeah.
Than
like
not.
I need you to tell me you love me. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you like that's another.
How does that occur?
So that's the
is that anxious?
Yeah, that's what we talked about, like the lack of validation, emotional validation from your parents is what you can go two ways. You could be like, fuck it, I don't need emotional validation. I got it all inside me. Or you could constantly be looking for that for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah. And
or
it's
not
the
the rest of your life, but you know.
I think it's the same in the adoptive community. Now I'm speaking for a community now. So just so you just so you know. But yeah, it's the same with the adoptive community. My sister was adopted as well. And for me, I did not want to find my biological parents. I didn't want to include them. I was just like, I'm doing this on my own. I don't care about anybody else. This is just me. I need to figure it out for myself. And that's how I chose to handle it. But my sister, she chose to handle it being like, I need to find my biological parents. I need to know who I am. I need to find and I need to secure myself.
Right.
And she found them. And even though they were very like shitty people, she latched onto them. And it's just because she had that void and she felt like she filled it up to a certain percentage.
Right.
And she's like, this is what I needed. Right. And I actually met my biological dad and I was just like, I don't need you at all. Like it was like, I'm past the point of needing you. And there might have been a point where I wanted to understand who I was. Right. But now that ship has sailed and now I'm on a path where I'm just filling my void myself. That's very true that there's two sets of people and one set is like seeking validation and the other set is pushing people away and just suppressing the actual issue and just going forth in life.
Yeah, and it gets even complicated when there are people with both. Both avoidant and anxious attachment. So and
that's disorganized, right?
To an extent. Yeah, that's disorganized to an extent. When you talked about your sister, so me and my brother grew up in the same household. We have conversations about this all the time where he does have an avoidant attachment style, but what he doesn't recognize is that he also has an anxious attachment style. We both received less emotional support from our parents, but our parents raised us in the same emotional state. Material wise, my brother got more things to him, right? So like, he was not material wise, like he was able to get away with things and things like that. But when it came to the emotional intimacy support stuff, we received the same thing, nothing. So when he got into his adult relationships, my brother is very take it or leave it with his adult relationships. But he's very much so, I need constant love. He cannot remain single. He's a serial monogamist. He cannot be by himself.
That's better than a serial killer.
Like, and he doesn't realize that that's because he's trying to fill that void. He doesn't, constantly like, do you love me? Do you love me?
Yeah.
But it is, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Because I need someone that is going to constantly love me. I can't be by myself. Because that would require me to love myself. If I'm by myself, there's not someone telling me I'm lovable. I have to tell myself I'm lovable. So for him, it's very much anxious. But then if that relationship ends, take it or leave it. It's whatever. It doesn't really matter to me. And I'm like,
how do you get out of that pattern though?
For me, it really depends on your partner. Your partner can really dictate what type of attachment you have. Your partner can influence you being insecure, not having a secure relationship. So like if your partner cheats on you, that diminishes the trust.
Right.
And then you may become anxious because of that. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love, because you cheated on me. So there could be things that your partner does that can move you into that attachment style. You could go through attachment styles in a relationship. I could go through starting off being very avoidant. I want no emotional connection with you. You are take it or leave it. I'm not going to share my feelings with you. And then as our trust builds, I can feel secure. So it really, it depends on your partner. And it also depends on you doing the healing that you need to do to get to that point. Like you may need to work on yourself and figure out why you push people away, why you feel like you need validation all the time. Like you need to get to that point also. But it it's possible to have a secure relationship or have a secure attachment style and be in a relationship where someone like completely shatters that and you become anxious.
So all of these attachment styles are like a pendulum swing.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily how you are permanently for the rest of your life.
Yes.
It's like the more education, learning, and self-awareness that you're doing, the better off you understand why you are this specific attachment style and what is needed to be able to diffuse that attachment style.
Right.
So it sounds like the only way to really get out of the pattern of anxiety and then avoidance, anxiety and avoidance is by recognizing it and then doing something about it.
Right.
You have to go through that process of reevaluating yourself. But the interesting thing is that that's a really hard step. I can't tell you how many times like my anger has happened until I realize this is a problem. Like you just don't see it, right? So like this is something that you're kind of speaking on that I think is like another blind spot. Where it's like, yeah, you just constantly push people away. I don't know if you're aware of that. You constantly are pushing people away. And nobody will say that to you because they wind up being scared of you, right? They're like, this guy doesn't give two fucks. Like he's just gonna like say whatever to me. He's gonna hurt me, so I'm not gonna say anything. Right? That's also something that like I guess therapy helps with.
Yeah.
Was it the relationship or was it like when you went to therapy that you actually identified like, oh, that's what I'm doing?
No, it was the relationship and me wanting to work on myself. Like, I think if I had broken up from the relationship and I didn't want to work on myself and I didn't bring it up, I'm sure my therapist would be like, oh, I see you have some sort of avoidant attachment. I'm sure that would eventually have come out. But even if my therapist says, I see you have an avoidant attachment, if I'm not willing to work on myself, your therapy appointment is an hour long.
Yeah.
You do the rest of the work.
Right.
So if I'm not willing to work on myself, nothing is going to come out of it.
So the why was more important for you.
Yeah, the why was so I think of this as like a foundational block, right? Your childhood and the security that you have from your caregivers and parents is the foundation. Then you build from there with different experiences in your life that make you a secure or whole person. If you don't have that foundation, which I didn't I kind of knew I didn't have that foundation. If you don't have that foundation, you're building on sand. It's never really formulating the way it needs to formulate. So your relationships are always a hot mess. And until I was like, okay, my foundation was fucked up. I need to find something solid to lay that out on. If that's therapy, that's me having self-love, that's me, whatever, that's my foundation that I'm building stuff on to get to the point where I have a secure relationship or a secure attachment with people.
Yeah. Why would I care?
This is a question of it doesn't matter why you would care. I think for me, it's if you're you're a person that doesn't care, I'm sure you don't care how you hurt people. I'm sure you don't care how you show up. I'm sure that doesn't matter to you.
No, not necessarily. I think that's true to some degree, right? Like for myself, it's hard to care about doing things differently when I feel content. Well, like if I'm coming from a place of just like I'm happy, like everything's fine, like I don't feel slighted, I don't feel angry, I don't feel like any type of way. Why would I care about doing the work? Why do I need to be better in this category when things have been just fine?
Right. So those that sometimes suffer with addiction, they're happy with their life. They're happy with what they're going through. But it's how does that affect others? I'm like always saying, what you do that makes you happy and it doesn't hurt others, keep doing it. Like we have all different preferences. If it doesn't affect anyone in a negative way, you're fine. But if the things that you're doing affects other people in a negative way, maybe you should check that. No one is forcing you to check it, but maybe you should consider it.
I think it's a good point. I think that's a valid point because it's like if you're doing something that you're just doing purely out of routine and you're hurting your loved ones and the people that are around you, and then the people around you are just like distancing themselves and you're seeing that response, you're probably going to care about it at some point.
Right.
Like even though it's not the best way to handle that situation or to start going down a different path, that might be one of those necessary evils. Because I don't know what I don't know. I don't know that I'm hurting anybody. I just know that I don't care about this specific thing.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that my current therapist said.
She has several. Every week is a different therapist with this girl.
I have so many mental issues. My therapist said to me one time when I told her like I had confronted someone about something, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so glad you confronted this person about it because I don't think anyone else has told them in their life." Yeah. So they continue to do that thing. So if no one has ever told you, "Oh, you've hurt me by ghosting me," or "You've hurt me by blah, blah, blah," and you're not aware like, oh, ghosting people hurts their feelings, then you'll just continue to do it.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Because like I know that like even like in dating, like women will ghost you, and they're like, because it's easier, and then the guy's like, what's going on, like, and like the guy's in shambles, and like he's like, women are bitches, like, and then they get real bitter and they're real angry, and then the next person that they message, like they're just like completely inappropriate, and that it stems from the girl that ghosted them or whatever the situation was. And it's the communication aspect of, you know, telling somebody about themselves. I think that that's, like I said, a necessary evil and something that like even the anxious people need, right? Like, hey, like I've had relationships where the person was too much. Like you're too involved in whatever we're trying to do here. And I'm like, just back off, right? Like, it's like, I don't need this type of love. Like I need like a little bit distance, you know? I'd like to think in some way that helped her. But like, who knows? Like,
delivery is also important.
I think that might have been the ignition of a new foundation for that girl.
Yeah, the delivery is also important. Like I said, I think if you're in a place that you want to work on yourself, I think this is important to know because it helps not only yourself. I know what my triggers are when I want to leave relationships. I know, okay, this is what is at the root of things. You are avoidant. You're trying to leave this relationship for the littlest thing, but this is what your root, you need to actually examine what the root of this feeling is coming from. But if I was like, okay, I'm leaving it because he put the fork in the spoon section and I'm happy with myself and I leave, I don't realize there's an issue. But when I'm like, oh, I'm about to leave because he put the fork in the spoon section, I'm like, is that really why you're about to leave, or are you just trying to avoid emotional connections with people?
Yeah, and for myself, like it's hard because I know the right thing, but I have to keep reminding myself to care. And it's not always apparent. What I want to do and then how it's going to affect somebody else are two completely different things. So like if I'm like, well, you know, take it or leave it. You can leave whenever you want. And it's like that. But then you tell the person that and you hurt their feelings. Then all of a sudden they're not trusting you. And then it kind of messes up your relationship. That becomes a bigger and bigger deal the more things that you do in that way.
Yeah, I think you touched on what I wanted to talk about next. Not only knowing your attachment style, but knowing your partner's attachment style. So if your partner is an avoidant attachment style, and they're like, take it or leave it, you as that person will take what they're saying to face value. Take it or leave it.
Right.
And you're like, okay, he wants me to leave. I'm going to leave. But if you're aware of your partner's attachment style and like, hey, I think maybe we need to take a break. I think right now you're not in a place to have this conversation, whatever, things that can help with that communication because you're aware that your partner's attachment style is that way.
Yeah.
Or if you have someone that's extremely anxious and they're always like, hey, like, then you're like, okay, now I know how to communicate with them. Like if they need that extra, I don't know, like touch or affection to show that they want love, or they need the gifts to show that they are being loved. You know that this is a bid to show their love. Like it helps not only knowing yours, but it helps knowing your partners because it helps understanding their triggers and it helps with how you communicate with someone when they have these different attachment styles.
Yeah. And we've seen that unfold in our relationship several times, I think. Like,
yeah.
The good and the bad, you know, both the things that we're talking about. I think that we both have similar attachment styles, which is actually helpful. It's actually helpful in a big way, but it's also not the greatest, right? Because like there are times where it's like, okay, just go, like, right?
And it's like, I will.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, oh fuck, like what? Like all the work that we've done, like, you know, we just completely just messed it all up. But then the good thing about both of us is that we're open communication wise, right? And we know that like you know when I'm getting mad or whatever, and then I know when you're shutting down, you know, so we are encouraging each other to kind of keep it within the realms of open communication.
Right,
You know?
right.
And I think because we have the same attachment styles, we're able to not take the things we say as harshly as somebody that is anxious would take it.
Right. I think if I had an anxious attachment style, I guess you already talked about it, your previous relationship. Like, yeah, that would not work.
Yeah, it doesn't work on so many levels. But
Yeah.
like, you don't really like. I didn't really internalize it in the way that we're speaking about now, but I can understand that. Yeah, like if I have an anxious person that is always seeking love and that's their biggest priority, then I have to constantly be reassuring. I have to constantly be like, I love you, I love you, I love you. Like, you know, I have to constantly be that. And I'm just not there at all. Like, I'm not to that degree. Like, I am to a certain extent, which is normal for me. But above that is just too much for me, right? But if that's what the anxious person is needing from me, I can't deliver that. So it's good to know what your partner is, and it's good to know what you are, because like you have, shortcomings that you're aware of. And if you can give insight on that, I think that that's helpful as a whole in the relationship. So it's like when I say things that are offensive or hurtful or whatever, it can be taken with a grain of salt at the same time. Like, it's like, hey, you said that this is not how you want to talk to me, and this is not what we're about in our relationship. Yeah, I did say that. You're right. Yeah, I messed up there. You're right. And you could check me on it. Right. It's just that you're aware of the position I'm in and the position you're in. And that makes it a better trade-off, being aware in general.
Yeah. And I think, I won't speak for you, but I'll speak for myself. I think I built myself up to the point of almost being secure in having a secure attachment. So there were moments where I had an anxious attachment where I was like, does this guy even love me? Like, is this what's going on? Is this like, am I thinking this all in my head? But I didn't ask.
The answer is yes. I do love you very much.
I love you too. But I didn't do it in a way where I was asking for reassurance. It was just all in my head mentally, where I was just like, does he love me? Does he love me? Because
like people with an avoidance style gives off the vibe that they don't give a fuck.
Exactly.
To anyone listening, they're like, what the fuck? Like, what do you mean? Do you question if he loved you? Why was that ever a question? But like, it's sincerely like when I get upset or something like that, it's literally like, I do not give a fuck about you anymore.
Right.
Like, that's what I don't know how else to explain it. But like, even like in the beginning of our relationship, when we first were like, well, what's your weaknesses? And I'm like, that's what I said. I was like, well, when we get in arguments, pretty blunt, you could probably walk away crying. Like, I was like, you just know the right things to say.
No, with me, I never cry.
Yeah, she's like, I haven't cried in like 7 years, so good luck, buddy. And then it was like the first or second argument we got into, you're like, yeah, I was crying, you asshole.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I fluctuate in that, right? Yeah. Like, if like I had gotten to, and also it was because I had worked myself to get to a point where I was able to be emotional, right? So a secure attachment is being able to share your feelings. I was trying my darndest to still be in that avoidant attachment where I wasn't showing you my emotions. So I was like, no, I'm not going to show this person. I remember we had gotten into an argument and we were in the car and I was so frustrated because I was like, fuck, he's going to see me cry. And I was like, that is an emotion I don't want you to see. Like, I don't want, like, no one sees me cry. I don't.
The funniest thing about that part is like, everyone agrees with you. You're like, yeah, I want them to see me cry because it does, like, they think that they won or something like that. But literally, for someone with my attachment style, I'm like, you can go cry if you want to. It doesn't make a difference to me. Like, it's not going to change my opinion. This is what I think.
No, it wasn't even like you won. It was, I was so avoidant is not showing other people your emotions. So because showing people your emotions make you intimate, make you emotionally attached, things like that. So like my friends haven't seen me cry. Like I don't cry in front of, like, that's my take it or leave it bullshit. But like, it's just like, I need to push away as much emotional things as possible. So for me, it was like, this is an emotional side of me. And I don't want you to see the emotional side. Not you won the argument. It was just like, I don't want you to see the emotional side.
So it's like, I don't want to be perceived as vulnerable.
Exactly.
Okay. Yep. So I don't face that issue, I don't think. Like, I don't think I've ever thought in that way. Like, the only time I can relate to that part is like when I want to bring something up.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't cried in like since I was like in middle school. But I don't think it comes from a space of I can't cry if I want, like because I don't want anybody to see me cry. I've just been taught not to.
Right.
You know, so like I don't know if that is because I don't want to show vulnerability to people. I don't believe it is, but I guess it could be. I don't know.
It's so interesting that you described your childhood and your parents as giving you secure attachment and then just said that you were told not to cry.
No, I wasn't told not to cry. I saw that my dad didn't cry. So I was like, oh, okay, we don't cry.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't told that. That was just something that I saw, and I was like, oh, that's what a man is. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought like you were defining secure as something different. I was like, that's interesting that you described
like,
someone
completely
telling
off, Brian.
Yeah, I was like, it's weird that you described someone telling you not to cry, and then you're like, I had emotional comfort. I'm like, no, you didn't.
Yeah, no, I did genuinely, like, I could always go to my mom for any type of thing emotionally. I chose not to. So like I avoided those
Did you go to your dad?
No, I avoided.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So your dad was open to having those conversations. You just avoided that.
I don't know. I never did it. I never tried to. My mom would be the one to try to initiate those kinds of conversations. If I reached out to my dad and did it, he would have had the conversation. He wouldn't have been helpful. But like he would have initiated it. Like he would have been like, oh, so da 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 da. And then it would have been around and around and we talk about it. I'm like, okay, fuck this. Like, you know, so like I would just avoid it at all times. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. No, because I'm thinking when you said secure, I assumed both of your parents were the ones that were constantly trying to provide that emotional support. And then when you got to middle school, you pushed away. Not that your mother was the one that was the main person that was providing the emotional support.
In like mother-father relationships that one person takes the cake and does everything. Or I don't think two people take the cake and do everything. I think you get certain things from one person and a certain thing from another person. Yeah, so like my mom, she was the compassionate one, the empathetic one, the one that was asking how are you feeling. And my dad was like, you got to work hard. You got to do these things, blah, 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 blah. Like that. And I took something from both of them. And I know that it's important to not roll over people's feelings because of my mom. But then with my dad, like I understand it's important to, you know, get things done.
For me, it's just an interesting dynamic because when we talk about secure attachments, we're talking about it from both parents. So both parents are folks that you can go to for emotional support and trust both people with your emotional well-being.
I don't know if that even exists. Like legitimately, I don't know if that's in this world. Because like, think about how hard it is to have a relationship in general. Like just as a person looking for somebody. But then to have both people be like whole and then being able to teach the youngster in the way that they need to hear, that's rare. I think that's like super rare.
I don't think that exists with our generation of parents. I think that exists now. I think millennials as parents are able to, the father and the mother are able to provide emotional support because we recognize, I think we are more mental health advanced than our parents are. So we recognize the devastating effects of childhood trauma.
Yeah.
My parents don't know what childhood trauma is.
That's true.
So like, I think now we're in a place where we're like, oh, both of us need to be able to provide this child with emotional support. But back in the day, our parents, I don't even know what generation that is, were more in the sense of like, dad is all about pull yourself by the bootstraps, and mom is like, I love you, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And that doesn't build that, like, if you needed to talk to your dad about emotional stuff, if you had that type of relationship, and that's all you knew about your father, you know, that's hard for you to go and seek emotional support from someone that never gave that to you.
Yeah. And that's a really good point because like the Generation X or whatever, the baby boomers, they were taught in a traditional sense, in a traditional way. So yeah, that's a valid point. And I think things are finally getting to a point where mental health is an actual thing that is being addressed.
Right.
So now people are opening their eyes to like, hey, yeah, when you dropped your baby on its head as a child, yeah, that was actually important, and they're not going through all these myths of doing the wrong thing and then just like, kids are resilient.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. But I think that awareness is the first step. And I hope that that's what we were able to kind of solidify.
Yeah, I think awareness is super important. Like I said, not just for yourself, but also for your partner. And I hope this discussion was at least good to understand what attachment styles are, because I don't think a lot of people know what they are. And then from there, being able to find what your attachment style is, the gaps that you see, and then work on those gaps.
All right. Well, that concludes another great episode of the 1024. If you also enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and follow the links in our show notes so you don't miss out on any of our content. If you have a question that you would like to have covered on our podcast, go to our website at the1024podcast.com. Click the tab on the right-hand side and submit your question. Remember to love God, family, and yourself always. And in all ways, take care.
Bye.